All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Watch and Listen. Today, we've got a very special guest, an industry veteran with us, Mr. Mike Margolis. Can you hear me now, Mike?
I hear you just fine. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. I feel like at the end of each episode, I should send an episode to, like, what was those companies? Was it Sprint or Verizon with the Can You Hear Me Now guy?
Well, it depends what era.
There's a... Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Same guy
he
now has
switched,
a new
right?
career. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. That's, okay. All right, well, he's got some brand loyalty there, I guess. Didn't he? Wait, where did he go from? He went from Verizon to Sprint? Is that what it is?
I believe so. Yeah, Verizon to Sprint.
Okay, well, I'm out to take his job. So basically, after every episode, because we've got some like latency issues, because obviously this is the internet, we're not all sitting in the same room together. What I'm going to do, my strategy from here on in, is to make sure that I have job security, is to submit my resume with these videos to whichever company is hiring as the new Can You Hear Me Now guy.
I don't think you'll ever have an opportunity to get that job. He's got like 20 years experience.
Wow. Well, thanks for being a good sport there. Thanks for
He's
the
most
encouragement,
qualified
Cameron.
Can You Hear Me Now guy.
And he's much better looking than you are, too. Just saying.
Fair enough. I think we'll just end the show here, and I'll go cry in the corner. Thanks, guys. That's a really good start to the show.
It's been great.
All right.
See you guys next time.
Okay. Seriously, enough about me. Let's go ahead and talk about some watches. Mike, you're an industry veteran. You've been there. You've done that. You've made some incredible friends along the way. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So I'm Mike Margolis. I've owned my own company since 2014. I'm an agent for North and South America for H.Moser and Company, for Haute Lance, for Czapek, and also for Singer Reimagined.
All right.
These are four small independent Swiss watch companies that either can't afford or can't justify a full-time salesperson covering the U.S. And Canada, Caribbean. So they hire my company, and I do everything for them over here: distribution, marketing, importing. I take care of service, shipping in and out. I do everything for them. So basically, I am the company from Canada to Argentina.
Wow. That's a pretty big demographic region there.
You get on an airplane, it's not so bad.
Yeah, I suppose so. Modern travel. Although right now it's a little bit difficult, obviously. So, yeah, I guess a lot of meetings via Zoom, like everybody's doing, or how's it working out for you right now?
Yeah, honestly, I've been Zooming, I've been FaceTiming, just regular old phone calls, text messaging, WhatsApps. It's we're a pretty connected world, so it's not hard to get in touch.
Okay, good. Well, there's some good news there, I guess, from all this stuff. So what we'll do is we're going to have, I think, a different episode for you to introduce yourself and to really kind of dive into the industry and what you've done and all the connections that you've made. On this episode, this is kind of a bonus because there was a huge bombshell this week that came from Switzerland, and that was that certain brands pulled out of Rolex. Certain brands pulled out of Baselworld, and one of those brands is Rolex. In fact, they spearheaded the whole exodus here, and this is it's pretty traumatic news for Baselworld. So I guess what we're going to do is we're going to talk about why Baselworld is important and why the news that we were just dealt is so incredibly it's massive news. So, Mike, you've been to Baselworld, right?
Oh, many times.
Many times. Cameron, have you ever been to Baselworld?
Yeah, I've been.
Okay, right.
For me, not as a retailer and not as a brand exhibiting anything, and also not a major client of any brands.
Right.
There's not a whole lot to do other than wander around and maybe see some people outside of booths. But as far as getting into any booths and seeing any new watches, it's pretty much an insiders only kind of event.
Right. So that was going to be one of the topics of discussion that we were going to have. But before that, let's talk about why Baselworld is or was important. Apparently, it's not so important anymore. Which one of you guys wants to chime in and kind of give us an idea as to why Baselworld was a thing, why it was started? I believe in the early 90s, right? I think maybe Cartier and a couple of other brands came together to start the Baselworld show.
Actually, no. Baselworld, in one form or another, has been around for almost 100 years. I think it was the 1930s or something like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
That it started. So it's been around for a very long time.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was 1939.
39. Okay.
Very old show. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the origins of the show and what happened and kind of like why, again, it's important. What is Baselworld for people like, the people that are listening to the show, maybe people that are not involved in the industry?
So, I mean, as a collector, Baselworld is the biggest candy store that a watch fanatic can go to. You'll see nearly every brand, although there's another show that we'll talk about as well. But you'll see nearly every brand. Some of them will construct literally a 3-story building on the show floor. It's kind of hard to imagine the scale of it, because when you think trade show, you think a 10-foot by 10-foot booth. And, these guys are building literally a 100-foot by 300-foot building, 3 floors tall.
That's amazing.
With offices and a bar on the top and everything. So it's a little hard to understand, but for the average guy who walks in, you pay about $60 and anybody can get into Baselworld, and you can walk around, and all the shows, all the displays will have a window where you'll see their newest pieces, what they call novelties. You'll see all the novelties out on display. And if you don't have an appointment, that's, like Cameron said, that's about all you're going to do is look in the window. What you have to understand is, for a brand, we'll set up hour-long appointments for a week, right? Mm-hmm. So you'll see, let's say, 10 or 12 different clients every hour on the hour, all day long. You try and run to the bathroom in between. And that client is going to be a jewelry store from wherever, and they come to you. You show them all the novelties, and they will literally place an order for their whole year right then and there. Wow. I'll take 3 of those and 5 of those and 6 of these, and I don't really like that one and whatever. And so for the brand, sure, you spend a lot of money and time and effort to set up this huge display, but you sit there for 8 days and every single one of your retailers comes to you and they place an order. So by the end of that week, you pretty much know what your turnover is going to be for the whole year. Now, of course, there'll be add-on orders. Oh, I need an extra one of these, or can I get more of those? But
right.
It's kind of amazing for a brand that you literally stay in one place for a week and all of your doors come to you, versus you getting on an airplane and rental cars and everything else and going and visiting the guy in Wichita, Kansas, and wherever.
Right. So, my kind of picture of Baselworld was, it was kind of a place where you just go to see the new stuff. And obviously there's so much more industry things that are happening there. But as a consumer, like as a collector, Cameron, you came from a different perspective when you went to Baselworld. So can you kind of explain like your side of what Baselworld was when you were there?
Well, you have the finished watches. You have the brands that are displaying their finished watches. You also have some smaller companies that are not watch companies. Mm-hmm. Companies that might make parts for watches or might provide services for watch brands, which is kind of interesting. But every year that part of the show has been shrinking as well, just like a lot of the other parts of the show have been shrinking and splitting off into other different shows where they could work specifically for that client. Mm-hmm. Because it is mostly the store owners, the retail store owners and buyers that are coming in so they can do all their business at one time.
Right.
It makes it very cost effective, and it's a really nice way to show everybody at the same time exactly what's coming out for the rest of the year, unless you have maybe some special pieces that will pop up over the next year at different times for special releases. But as a brand, as a watch brand, to be able to have all of your orders for the entire year or the majority of them, that's very beneficial. You can essentially say this design isn't selling and we're not going to produce it.
Right.
Or you can say this one sold really well. We can go into production with this and we can produce X number of units and have X number of back stock. And here's what we're going to need for parts and everything. You can get that done in a matter of weeks, which is amazing. It's there's a reason it's valuable for the brands, even though it's quite expensive to exhibit.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. So in terms of business, it's the perfect place. I mean, because you have everybody there. But why, if it's so good for business? I mean, let's talk about what's happening with Baselworld, because obviously something is happening with this exodus, really, of brands. Because Swatch left in 2019. That was the last show that they did was 2018. And you've got other shows that are kind of popping up here and there, and that's really what's happening. Rolex and Chopard and a couple of other brands. Rolex and Patek Philippe are really the two big ones that made this announcement just this week. They're making this exodus, and then Swatch Group made this exodus a few years ago. Why do you guys suppose this is happening? I mean, let's talk about it from kind of, again, two different perspectives here. One, maybe Cameron, you can give us a perspective of just someone. Let's put aside the fact that you have a brand. Let's say if you were just a consumer that came into the show, and then Mike, obviously, if you can give us some background on your industry background. So, who wants to start?
Well, I think as a consumer, you have SIHH, and the whole Watches and Wonders show is going to be more geared towards the consumer,
right?
Where you can go in and actually touch watches.
Mm-hmm.
You can have experiences. There are talks. There are things that you can do as a consumer that are going to bring you a lot more value than going to Baselworld just to kind of look into the windows. So that, I think, is one thing. That's a totally separate type of show. So from a consumer, Basel doesn't really do it for me.
Okay.
Except, I'm going to contradict you a little bit, Cameron. An end user can't get into Watches and Wonders, or what used to be the SIHH.
Mm-hmm.
That's a trade industry show only. It's invitation only. I'll tell you a story. Let's see, this was 2009 or so. I was working for Hublot at the time. Hublot was, or is, maybe I should say, also was, an exhibitor at the Basel Fair. But at the same time, they knew that all of their customers were going to be in Geneva during the Geneva show. So they would take out a big suite at one of the hotel ballrooms and would invite their retailers to come over, because the Geneva show was in January and Basel's always in March or April. So they'd have kind of a 2-month jump on showing some of their newer pieces. So that's kind of how it happened, that a lot of the brands that weren't actually at the show that used to be called the SIHH were still in Geneva at the time. So 2000, I think it was 2009, I asked, I won't tell you who it was, but I asked the person who was head of the SIHH show for the Americas if I could have an invitation. And by way of doing that, I gave him a list of the watches that I owned who were exhibiting at that show. So 3 Panerais, a Roger Dubuis, I own a Vacheron, I own a Jaeger. At the time, I owned 5 IWCs, right? So I'm not a small collector. And here's a list of all the watches that I own from the brands that are exhibiting at your fair.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, I cannot let you into my fair. My fair.
Interesting.
He said that with a French accent, if that means anything. He said to me, you work for a brand that does guerrilla marketing in our town during our fair to our customers while we're there trying to do business. And some of them we've actually paid money to get them to Geneva for that fair. We put them in hotels, and we're not letting you into our fair. So I actually never got into the SIHH, even as a collector, until the first year that H.Moser exhibited there, which I think was 2016. So before that, even as a big collector with a big list of brands that I own that are at the fair, I couldn't get in. So Cameron, I hate to disagree with you, but for you to say, well, that as a collector, unless you're a huge whale collector who's got, the Lange perpetuals and the whatever minute repeaters, the brands aren't going to invite you in. It's actually very expensive for the brand to invite you into the fair. they pay for that because it's very different from Basel. There's free food all day, breakfast, lunch. There's champagne and espresso and all that. And it costs a brand a lot to invite somebody into the fair. So,
that is true. The big one, though, for us would be Watches and Wonders in Miami, as far as like an experience goes for the consumer. But yes, SIHH, if you go to Switzerland, you're not getting in there. I had invites from other brands who were willing to invite me as a friend kind of thing. But that's not going to be standard. And really it is, like with Audemars Piguet, I used to work for them, and it was some big heavy hitter clients that were buying $1 million worth of watches a year that would get that invite. It was very special.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that being said, okay, so gentlemen, let's talk about this whole like inclusivity versus exclusivity thing. So with Basel, since we're not really talking about SIHH, I mean, they are obviously a competitor, and there are new shows that are popping up by different foundations left and right, basically. It seems like there is a hyper competition within Switzerland for the attention of a bunch of different people. Now, what I'm trying to figure out is exactly who those people are. Because Baselworld, you're talking about, if you're going to Baselworld, the only thing you're going to see really is you're going to see the watches on display, and you don't really have an opportunity to really play with them. Whereas with SIHH, you might have more of an opportunity to play with them, but you have to be such a major hitter in order to do that. What I've heard, like being in collector groups and being a collector myself, or a quasi collector, what I heard was, if you're going to Baselworld and if you're a somebody, then it's very possible that you're actually going to sit down with someone from the brand and you would be able to see some of the novelties that came out. Is that like kind of how it happened? Like, explain this. I'm trying to figure out what this whole like mess is, what this really does to people like us as consumers, obviously with the exception of you two. But if we're not industry people, and if we're not going there to buy or to talk to manufacturers, and you're like, if I'm not a singer, for example, like you're a client to singer, I'm not going there to figure out what my manufacturing processes are going to be. I just want to see the watches and play with them, and they're all in one place. So
which it's the wrong venue.
Right.
These are venues that are designed for the industry to sell watches to the retailers, and then to also invite the media in to get the word out about all of the new products and show them the products face to face, and then they can select which ones they want to maybe do a more in-depth review on, or things like that.
Okay.
So it's not designed for the consumer at all.
Right. Okay. So neither one, Basel or SIHH, right?
Yeah, neither one.
Okay.
Yes. Some brands are more inviting to the collector. I would say the smaller brand, the better the chance. You're not going to walk into Rolex or Patek and you're just not going to get past the lady and the guard at the front door.
Yeah.
But if you walk into, a Groenfeld or a Voutilainen, the chance is pretty good that you might meet Bart and Tim or Max or Kari.
Right.
That happens with the smaller brands because there's less of a team. They're more interested in their clients because, these guys are selling 100 or 1,000 watches a year instead of 100,000 watches a year. So
and it's very
smaller
likely
brands, you'll have more chance.
Right.
And it's very likely that, like with your brands, Mike, I bet a lot of the clients, the end clients, even if items are sold through a door, through one of the retailers, I bet there's a lot of interaction between the brand and the end client when you're dealing with such a small volume of timepieces.
Right. Well, in my industry, I'm in the insurance industry, so there's levels of people. I mean, there is middlemen. There are middlemen for middlemen. And it sounds like in the industry that you guys are in the watch industry, it's kind of sort of similar, but not to the level, obviously, of the insurance world, because we're talking about, scales here. And the insurance world is, in terms of product and in terms of just gross dollar amounts, I mean, they're far and beyond what the watch industry is. But I have a question for both of you guys. So the reason that I'm kind of pushing this whole consumer standpoint is because the people that listen to the show, they're collectors, they're consumers, they're watch fans, aficionados, so on. Why is it important for them? Why is this news such big news? Like, what's the point of this whole thing? Why are we even discussing this, I guess, at this point?
I mean, it's big news for the collector. Well, it's only big news for the collector if he wanted to someday go to the show and look around and look in the windows and see the new stuff and kind of experience it.
Right.
If the guy's going to keep sitting in his living room in Cincinnati, Ohio, and reading about all the new releases on Watchville, I would say it really doesn't matter, because the brands are going to make their releases, whether they're in Geneva or Basel or Dubai or London or whatever watch fair they choose to go to.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm not sure it makes that much difference for somebody who's not going to the fair.
Got it.
For the industry guys, I mean, this is huge, just absolutely huge.
Right. Cameron, what about you? What do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. For the industry, it's going to change the way a lot of things have to be done as far as sales and marketing go. For the end client, it might actually be kind of nice to not receive a whole bunch of brand new watches dumped on you all at once. It can be spaced out throughout the year, and it might actually lead to more opportunities with your local retailers to have some sort of event where those timepieces could arrive at your local retailer for some sort of display, instead of everyone traveling to one location at one time who's in the industry to then regurgitate that back to you at a later date.
Right. So it sounds like we kind of have a little bit of this conflicting situation here, because in the beginning we were talking about those are ears from a dog. Disregard that. We're talking about, you know, the ability to go there and to make your orders and to place your orders and get whatever it is that you need in kind of one full swing. And now is it because the industry is evolving? Are numbers different? You know, are more or less watches being sold? Is it just unnecessary? Like, for example, trade shows are suffering big time. In any industry, is this kind of like, is this a reflection of this?
Think about the amount of money and it's not everyone. This is Rolex, Patek, Chanel, Tudor. It's just some major brands.
Right.
But it's not everyone that doesn't want to be involved. So if you're large enough, why would you want to pay these crazy amounts of money to go to this one show where they feel like not only they're being kind of robbed for the amount of money it costs, but they're also putting their retailers through a very stressful situation where they have to spend a lot of money to be in one location. Everyone's fighting over a place to stay. Everyone's fighting over airfare. It's a lot of people, and it's in a town that doesn't totally make sense for those brands. Geneva historically was the place where all the watches from the valley came by horseback over the mountains down into Geneva, and they were sold once the snow melted. So Geneva historically is really the heart of it. And you have Rolex and Patek are right there with tons of history in that town. So it kind of makes sense for them, because of their size, to have something independent and kind of rule the show.
Okay.
But there's even more than that. Basel's a small town. I meant to look this up, but I didn't. I think the population of Basel's around 150, let's say less than 250,000 people. So you have to think about how many hotel rooms, how many restaurants, what's their infrastructure of taxis and trams and things like that in a fairly small town. And the biggest problem with Basel is that you can't find a hotel room, you can't find a restaurant, you can't get a meal. When you do find a restaurant or a hotel, it's 5 times the normal price during the fair, because supply and demand.
Sure.
And so all of us have come to just love Basel and hate Basel at the same time. And there are people who are just, I mean, I will mourn missing my friends that I saw once a year, but at the same time, I will not miss, and Basel's a beautiful city, but I will not miss Basel one speck.
You know, that seems to be kind of the, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, to pay $1,000 a night for a hotel room,
$1,000 a
that has
night.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And a hotel room that in the regular time of the year is 100 or 150.
Wow. I'm talking about
And
price
you
gouging.
gladly pay it because otherwise you're going to commute 2 hours by train from Zurich or God knows where. And I won't miss that part about Basel at all. $100 taxi rides and $50 pizzas. I won't miss that at all.
Is it at least good pizza for $50?
No.
Yeah, I can't imagine
No.
Swiss pizza to be good. I don't really. I mean, obviously they have a pretty good edge there on the cheese, but how are they with the dough? Do they know what they're doing? Or
I mean, in defense of Switzerland in general, I'll give you this example. When I go to Starbucks, I order a double espresso, and it's about $2 here in the United States. And when you go to Switzerland, it's $6. So everything there is ridiculously expensive. But during the show, they're doubling and tripling things in the city of Basel because it's a small town and there's not that many hotel rooms.
right?
And these guys have 2 events a year. They have Basel World for watches and jewelry, and they have Art Basel. And if you thought that, each of those is 2 weeks long, well, they've got 48 weeks out of the year when nobody comes to their town. So, I kind of understand it, but at the same time, when you're a victim,
Yeah.
if I can use that strong word, I won't miss Basel at all.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let's stop with Art Basel for a second. Isn't there an Art Basel in Miami? Or am I confusing
is.
something? There is. Okay. Is it the
Yeah.
same? Is it like the same organizers?
It's a
yes,
different show, though.
I think.
Okay. All right. So I mean, there are opportunities there, and there are opportunities to go like obviously outside of Switzerland. I know, like for example, Salon QP, which is a consumer show, by the way, right?
I've never been to that one. I don't know. I know it's in London.
Okay, Cameron, any kind of understanding of Salon QP?
No, I haven't been to that one either.
Okay, so basically, here's what I know about Salon QP. It's put on by, I believe, QP magazine, right?
Yep.
So basically,
Very good magazine, by the way.
Very, very
if
good
you
magazine.
are into watches, that is a good magazine to subscribe to.
Yep, I'll agree with that. So QP is more of a consumer show. And what kind of boggles my mind is, yes, you've got a bunch of different shows that are now for industry people, but why are there only, and by the way, Salon QP is in London. And yes, London has a very large collectors group and a lot of very wealthy people. But my confusion is why isn't there a show in the States? Like, there could easily be a show in New York.
There is a show in New York.
Okay, well, all right.
What is the, I forget the name of it.
Watch Time.
What? Yeah. But it's such a small, from my understanding, it's a small show, right? It's like a little.
It's very new. So it was small and it's growing every year. I went to the first year because I happened to be working in New York at that time. And it was wonderful, but yes, very small, but growing.
Right. Okay. All right. So, go ahead.
We just, as Americans, we've just never managed to put together the big watch show for us.
Mm-hmm.
There's a jewelry show the last weekend in May, first weekend in June in Las Vegas called JCK. And a lot of watch brands go there, but it's much more a jewelry show where you'll buy whatever rings and earrings and necklaces. And sure, there'll be watch brands that exhibit there, but it's really not a watch show.
Right. Isn't there like a spin-off that's happening in that one? Isn't it called Couture?
Yes, there's a special section.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a show within a show for the higher end things. You do have Watches and Wonders Miami that's happened 2 times so far, which is an interesting show. Actually, there's no charge to get in. You just wander in and look around.
Interesting.
And that's a good one. That's fun. I've done that a couple of times. It's a good show. You get to meet a lot of end users. I was there for, I think it's a day show, and I think I only saw 1 or 2 retailers there. It's really end users, but it's Miami, so it's very Latin American, and I mean, it's a great show. We had a lot of fun with it. And then, like you said, there's a Watch Time New York, and last year there was a Watch Time Los Angeles. And those are good shows. You know, each of the brands will again take out a 10 by 10 space and have a counter and a showcase and show everything off to anybody who wants to pay the whatever it is $100 to get in.
Right. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and transition into now why it's important for the industry. So you obviously Rolex, the biggest manufacturer, and then Swatch Group with Omega as the second. Plus, you know, let's go down a list of some of the brands that Swatch Group owns. You've got a massive brand like Tissot. I mean, they manufacture ridiculous amounts of watches. They might not be, you know, uber high end. They're more of an entry level luxury brand, but Tissot is a huge manufacturer of watches, along with Longines. I mean, you see Longines on all kinds of different advertisements, like tennis, like motor racing, things of that sort. I mean, these are not small brands owned by a very massive brand, and now you've got basically the biggest brands in the world that have left. What's happening now? What are they putting together? I heard there's some rumors of like sub-shows and obviously shows in Geneva with Patek and Rolex kind of spearheading, or Rolex really spearheading, and then Patek, you know, really kind of following their path there. Can you guys shed some light on what you think is going to happen? And, you know, from an industry's perspective, why is that beneficial for the industry? We know that obviously the brands want a little bit more attention. That's why it's assumed, or maybe it's factual, that these brands are leaving the shows. So let's talk about this. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll just say one quick little thing. If you look at the US, you'll notice monobrand stores. A lot of these brands want to be the only brand. They don't want any competition sitting next to them. They don't want anybody else to outshow them or, you know, dazzle the audience more than they do. So if you look at that, you can kind of see that this might be a natural progression for some of these big players wanting to have their own shows, or shows where it's invite only and only the people they want to bring in can come in. Kind of makes sense to me.
Okay.
Sure, it does, but the big brands have the pull. So let me back up a little bit. 1991, all of the Richemont brands, that would be IWC and Lange and Jaeger-LeCoultre, that whole group decided that they were going to split apart from Basel and start their own show in Geneva, which they called the SIHH, the International Salon of High Horology. Mm-hmm. There were a few other brands like Audemars Piguet, who were not a Richemont brand, that joined them. And for many years, those two, you would have Baselworld, and then immediately after Baselworld, you would have the SIHH show. So an American retailer could come in, he'd go to Basel for a couple of days, he'd go to Geneva for a couple of days, he'd fly home, and he could see basically all of his brands. Then I think it was 2009 or so, all of a sudden the SIHH switched, and they decided to have their show in January.
Right.
And Basel was still in March or April. So now the retailers have to come to Switzerland twice, even if they only have a few brands, because if you're a Jaeger dealer, you're not going to get any of the new pieces if you just don't show up for the show. So now the retailers were having to come twice. They'd come once in January for a week, then they'd fly back home, then 2 months later they'd fly back and go to Baselworld. So it's been hard on the retailers to have to do that, because for the most part they're paying their own way, outlandish hotel fees and airplanes and all that. And then what happened was last year, the two shows agreed that they would come together again, and they would be not concurrent, but they would be in a row. So there would be a week of Geneva, and then there would be a week of Basel. And everybody was pretty happy about that, except they chose to do that end of April. That was for this year, so a few weeks from now, end of April and early May. And the brands were all complaining. Supposedly they did it that way because that was the only time that the exhibition space was available. But the brands were complaining that you can't get all of your orders in May and still produce and distribute to make money for this year. So I don't think anybody was really happy with the fairs being in April and May, like they were supposed to be in 2020 in this year. And then when the coronavirus thing happened, first the SIH, I have to get this right, SIHH canceled and said we can't do our fair, and then Baselworld canceled as well, and then Basel actually said that they weren't canceling, they were postponing until January of 2021.
Right.
And the week that they chose in January of 2021, the week before and the week after, the exhibition space in Geneva was booked. So there was a whole conspiracy about they did this on purpose. And so then you had all this bickering between the Basel people and the Geneva people, and it just turned into a mess.
It's funny because you would think that people in Switzerland would probably work a little bit more cohesively when it comes to stuff like this. I mean, it's their industry.
You would think.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It sounds like a bunch of children bickering over like who gets to go where and why, and you know.
Yep, and you did this without telling me, and so now I'm going to do this without telling you.
Exactly.
And then there was a whole issue of refunds. So I mean, again, you have to understand, even the small brands in Basel who have a, whatever, 4 meter by 4 meter, let's say a 10 by 10 or 15 by 15 space, they're paying 6 figures for that space.
6 figures?
So yes, sir.
Holy,
for that little space in the basement.
Yes,
in the basement.
So it's a ridiculous amount of money for them to exhibit at that. And then when all of a sudden, the first thing that happened was when they postponed the show from May of 2020 to January of 2021, they told all of the distributors, no, I said that wrong again, all the exhibitors, they told them that there was going to be a 15% penalty.
You got to be kidding me.
They were going to forfeit some of their money, even if they agreed to stay in the fair for next year, because they had fixed expenses for canceling the fair this year, 15%. So if you paid $100,000 for booth, they were only going to credit you $85,000 toward there. And if you chose to ask for a refund, then you were only going to get 70% back. You were going to forfeit 30%. So they really stuck it to their exhibitors, in my opinion. And then you had a lot of exhibitors starting to go, you know what, this just doesn't make sense. Why are we doing this? These people are not treating us well. And then the bomb dropped this week that Rolex, Tudor, Patek, Chopard, and Chanel had all decided that they were going to have a fair in Geneva at the same exposition center, but not the same fair during the Watches and Wonders, or SIHH week.
That's funny.
So once that happened, that's basically a death blow to Basel. Without Rolex and Patek, I mean, I can't say how busy Chanel and Chopard are, because those are brands I've never had a whole to do with. But without Rolex and Patek, that show's dead.
Right.
And the Swatch Group had left already.
Imagine being a small brand.
Yeah.
Without them, you're not going to have the kind of traffic, and you're not going to be able to pull retailers from across the world to come out to see you, because you're just not big enough for them.
Yeah.
And you're still paying your $75,000 to be there, or whatever the number is.
Yeah, so, that's unbelievable.
So I think that's really going to be the end of Baselworld. I put a picture on my Instagram today that I really feel like last year's Basel was my last one.
It's crazy. I've been reading upon, I'm just reading just different blog posts and articles and listening to a bunch of different other, podcasts that were talking about this whole Basel thing. And everybody's like, what's going to happen to the city of Basel? What's going to happen to all those sausage makers and all those hotels and all those people who work in the industry? I don't feel so bad anymore. Like, with the price gouging that they've got. Come on,
I don't
now.
either.
And it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, this sounds like a shit show of management. I mean, the show was so mismanaged, and it sounds like this has possibly been going on for a very long time, that it was destined to be doomed anyway. So why are we? It's like almost crying over spilt milk here at this point. Like, let's move on. Let's start some other shows or whatever. Let these brands do that.
It was an out of control freight train.
Yeah,
it had a lot of momentum. And people had to hop on in order to continue business and exist. You were not going to jump off that train, but as soon as some heavy hitters were off, there's no reason to stay for it to crash.
Right. Yeah, and the only
so
go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say. So now you're a brand who exhibits or used to exhibit at Baselworld, and I don't have to name a brand. I mean, it could be any of them. What do you do now? Right.
Exactly.
So now, what do you do now? Do you try and get into one of the other shows? Do you decide to have a regional traveling road show where you do a weekend in Asia and a weekend in Europe and a weekend in the United States? You invite all your retailers in. Let's say you even pay their plane fare and their hotel, and you have them all to yourself for 2 days, and it probably still costs you less than whatever it would cost you to exhibit at Baselworld.
Right.
The problem is, picture yourself, you're a retailer, and you have a multi-brand store. You have 20 brands, 30 brands, whatever. Are you really going to go to 30 of those little regional fairs and you spend, 2 days with whatever, 2 days with Bell and Ross and 2 days with Tutima and 2 days, with every single brand? Or are you going to say, you know what, send me the pictures, we'll place an order?
Yeah. Why doesn't that? I mean, obviously there's some tangibility there with going to a show and actually physically handling a watch. Because obviously, like, you can have all of the data on the watch. It's a 39 millimeter case and it's got a gold fluted bezel and this, that, and the other. But I guess it's like there is something there when it comes to handling the watch. But it sounds like you wouldn't really be even handling the watch at Basel anyway. If you're not some kind of major player, you're not going to sit down with these manufacturers. You're basically just going to walk by, or maybe there's some kind of other person that sits down with you and
if you're one of the retail doors, then yes, you would be handling watches. You'd have appointments.
All right, got it. Okay,
but
so basically,
not if you're just an end client.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, you have to remember who the brands sell to. Now, there are certainly some brands that sell direct to end users. I think that's one of the reasons why Audemars Piguet and Richard Mille left the SIHH after last year, because they felt that they didn't need to go to a fair because they're really only doing direct sales. But if you're a Rolex, you don't sell direct to John Q. Public. You sell to a Rolex retailer, and that retailer sells to John Q. Public. So they're still going to meet with their retailers, and a brand like Rolex has enough power to say, hey, we're having a meeting in Dubai, and every Rolex retailer in the world will get on a plane and go there.
Right.
But if you're a small brand who, sells, let's say, a small amount of watches every year, and you have a small amount of retailers, your retailer's not going to get on a plane and go visit you in Dubai. He's just not going to. He's got 20 other brands that he's supposed to visit as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a complicated
situation.
situation.
You have a Rolex account. It's essentially an ATM machine in your jewelry store that you can access. Yeah. So you are going to do whatever it takes to get as many of those Rolex watches as you can to come into your store.
Right.
You will fly anywhere to any show, whatever they want.
Right. Well, apparently now it's Geneva.
I started on a 100% battery, and my phone's warning me. I'll be back in 20 seconds with a plug-in battery. Keep talking. I can still hear you.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess while he's doing that, Cameron, from your perspective, I mean, is this really that important to you? I mean, it doesn't sound like you would probably like 6 figures for a 10 by 10 space. Really?
Yeah, very excited.
Okay.
I thought that show was outdated. I thought they were taking advantage of the brands. I felt
Definitely
as though
sounds like it.
I felt as though it needed to end. and it was just a matter of time.
Right.
I think it's going to be great for the industry.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about how they treated some of these brands and kind of raked them over the coals,
Definitely.
all of that money and energy and everything that's spent on exhibiting at this show, it's not always recouped. And as the buyer of that watch, in the end, you are paying for that show. You are paying for these people who are being raked over the coals at that show.
That's crazy. That's just
It's not great for the end consumer, I don't think. I think it'll be much better with that show gone and new shows or different ways for people to access the new releases.
Right. Yeah, I guess I'm going to have to agree with you. You know, it's funny because from someone like me who's not in the industry, who kind of sort of left the industry, I guess, a while ago, because after I left my previous show, On Time, I kind of went into the whole automotive sphere and did a podcast on cars and the people within the car industry. I kind of forgot, what the importance of Basel was. And when I'm coming back into this now, I'm kind of still not very excited about the fact that Basel's really a thing. Coming from a collector standpoint, we had a group, and I think it still exists. I just haven't attended in a very long time, called the LA Watch Gang, and there are groups like Red Bar as well that are still going strong. And whenever I'd meet with people who either went to Basel or who had friends that went to Basel who were industry people, everybody always complained. It was never really a positive thing. So it's kind of like people are saying it's the end of an era, and we got a bunch of people. Rachel from Crown and Caliber, she sent us this awesome kind of answer sheet of people that submitted questions or the answers to the question of what do you think is happening and how do you feel about Baselworld? And the overwhelming majority is not that big of a deal, kind of good and riddance. It's really it's the end of an era, but kind of in a good way.
Yeah, and like I said, as an industry guy, I mean, there's nothing better than you sit in an office for a week and your retailers come to you and place orders. You get to see everybody. I get on one plane instead of 20 planes to visit 20 retailers. So, I will miss that. I'm sure there will be a show that will replace Baselworld in some way. And of course, we'll be visiting our retailers like we always do.
Right.
But I will miss it. Okay.
All right. Well, there's one person that will. So I guess, if we're really that interested, we could do a little poll on our Instagrams and see, what the majority is, if people are going to miss it or not. But I don't really even think that I want to do that, because that doesn't even sound like something that is going to really prove anything. Because I think the majority of people that are going to be answering it are people that basically just were reading articles. It sounds like the majority of the benefit for Baselworld for the consumer was the fact that, they opened things up for journalists. And journalists came in, took pictures, and then obviously, the novelties, the press releases and things like that from the brands themselves. To me, that was really kind of the only benefit of Baselworld, is you get to see what new stuff is coming out. What new bezel has Rolex put on their watch? It was kind of the most exciting thing, right? And then periodically you'd see something from a manufacturer. I don't remember, it doesn't sound like it was a Basel thing, but when Audemars released the new watch, what's it called? The 13, what's the really controversial one? The one,
the Code 1149.
Code 11.
Right?
There you go. Yeah, the Code 1140. How was that released? Was that even released during a show, or was that just an independent release?
Yes, that was at SIHH in January of 2019.
Got it.
Yeah, they're a different show, or they were a different show.
They were, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, anything else that you guys want to add? Any final thoughts? Sounds like okay. Well, let's give it another shot. Go ahead, Cameron.
I like George Kern's Instagram. You can see the latest Breitling releases right now.
Right.
Just on his wrist. I think that's one of the cooler things that might come from this, is having a little more access to some of these perceived larger brands and the releases, getting it out there to the clients.
Right.
I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is cool. Look, social media has obviously made it so much easier for the watch consumer to get excited about things. You have brands like Watch Niche, for example. These are watch marketing brands that came out of nowhere, and are pushing brands, and they're doing it the right way, in my opinion. Some people would beg to differ within the watch industry, but they're kind of old school and they're not really used to that. But that's a topic of conversation for a completely different time. Anyway, Mike, any final thoughts on this?
I think we kind of beat the Basel horse to death, or maybe it was dead before we started.
I think so.
No,
yeah.
I think we've kind of been around the circle. We've pretty much said what has to be said about this.
Good deal.
I do have one question about the brands that you work with.
Okay.
Yes.
For new watches, did they have things planned, and do they push it back, or do they still try and release everything as planned?
So Moser was planning to be at the SIHH that was just canceled. So we've been slowly releasing. We put a couple things out early. You wait a few weeks. You put a couple more things out instead of dropping everything at once. I think it's actually better that way, because on the first day of the fair, when you've got 30 brands that are all announcing their novelties at the same time, unless you have something that's really special, it kind of gets lost in the flood. So this way, let's say a month ago, we released 3 Fume dial pieces. About a week ago, we released 3 Vanta Black pieces. There'll be a few more things that are coming yet. So I think you're better to dribble them out. Rolex and Patek both announced that they were not going to release any of their 2020 novelties.
Mm-hmm.
They're just going to wait until next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
I think for them is wise. I mean, they can't even
exactly.
deliver enough of what they already create.
Right.
So why bring new things out?
Correct. I agree.
Well,
I agree.
I think it's a very smart strategy, because they could also play it in a way where they are now, like, obviously their production has ceased, so they could do a lot of things to create, almost an artificial type of deficit for these watches, pushing the values of these things up even higher. So
please, no more, no more.
They might. I mean, look. Let's look at their history. Let's be real. I mean, every single time I open up an article or I read something online about Rolex and Patek, it's like, the prices have gone up. So I don't think they're going to let this crisis go to waste. I think they're definitely going to take advantage of this, but we'll see, I guess.
I hope not.
Yeah, well, you and I both, because, I'd still like to buy some watches.
Yeah, I remember being a young kid looking at the Rolex stores and seeing Submariners for $3,000 on the shelves.
Oh, yeah.
Just sitting there waiting to be taken home.
Yeah.
It's amazing how that's changed so quickly as well.
Yeah.
Yep, sure has.
Yeah.
Well, we went kind of like this episode's been kind of like a little bit of a roller coaster. We went from a high to a low to a high to a low. Now we're really all upset again because watch prices are out of control. So it's like, I guess let's try to end on a good note. Let's wrap this up. Let's plug our stuff here. Since we've got nothing else, it sounds like we beat this horse. I'm taking the words that you've muttered earlier, Mike. Is this horse is dead? It's not moving. So let's start with you, Mike. Let's let people know where they could find you and what you do and what you can help them with.
So like I said, I'm an agent for H.Moser, for Haute Lance, Czapek and Company, and also Singer Reimagined. Easiest way to find me is either on my website, which is horologyworks.com, or I'm on Instagram as The Watch Enabler.
Yes, you are. That is very, very accurate. Cameron, your turn.
Yeah, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Weiss Watch Company, or Cameron M. Weiss. You can see all kinds of photos of making watches and cars and family and kids and chickens as well, if you'd like.
Right. This is a very good time for chickens. I mean, with everything going on. Does your chicken
I get
lay
about
eggs?
8 to 10 eggs a day.
There you go. All right. Well, you're not going to go hungry, apparently.
No.
What happens what do you feed the chicken? Chicken feed?
I have a good-sized backyard, and they root around all day in the backyard, and they pick up worms and bugs, and they eat the grass and the weeds.
Organic chicken.
And then I supplement their food with dried grubs, which are like basically fly larvae, and some different corn and grains and things like that.
Okay, great. On the
But
next
as long as
episode
it's
of
nice
How to
out.
Maintain Chickens.
Yeah.
All right, guys. My Instagram is very simple. It's where you can find me. You DM me, put some comments down if you guys want to talk about something watch related or car related. I'd be more than happy to do that. At Road Stories Mike. Make sure to visit crownandcaliber.com for some amazing pre-owned watches. They've got some pretty crazy deals happening right now, so get out there. Let's not stop the economy. Let's continue to buy stuff and enjoy stuff so that, we can come back to something that actually works. So yeah, go to their website, enjoy, their Instagrams at Crown and Caliber, I think, at Crown and Caliber. If I'm wrong, we'll correct that in the post there. But yeah, enjoy, guys. Thanks, Mike, for joining us for this episode about Basel. This is going to be a bonus one. We will have another episode after this, so stay tuned, guys, and thanks very much. We'll see you guys soon.